welcome to this video. What could be the obvious thing that Laura and other researchers do not consider? This question I make because it's Laura herself that is making this observation. So if my Johannes Malland's hypothesis and especially the ancient DNA research and conclusions of David Reich would be right, then we are talking about a kind of imperium conquering the world, so overturning the whole world. What David Reich researches is mainly Western Eurasia, and that is where we will most focus on. There's a lot of buildings going on their routes, buildings of logistics going on their routes during this population turnover, and obviously there is massive need for building materials, food and salt to conserve. Both abundant in Malta, food, salt and clay for pottery. The building material mined, which is another thing. This was about feeding, and this is about building materials for the port city and to export to build their logistics on the way to turning over the world, because they will need logistics. I will mention one logistic, for instance Göbekli Tepe, which is one of many in that region between Turkey and Syria. But there are Palma, close to Spain, has the same kind of buildings, logistics, dormitories for soldiers, for agriculturists, for hybrid workers, because they work on the land but they defend as well. So on the rest of their route and their population turnover, they quickly have to build storage, housing, logistics for these large groups of soldiers, agriculturists. Initially, I do not expect families, so no women. If you conquer new areas and enter into unknown territory, you do not expect women to go along, although there are reports of women going into battle. So as said, the salt being needed for conservation of all kind of foods for the many workers and animals and the many soldiers and farmers that are kind of marching or sailing or rowing or navigating through the strategical Mediterranean Sea that cuts deep into the areas that they will conquer. I mean, with cutting deep, that is from Gibraltar to, let's say, Levant, Canaan, Anatolia. etc. More to the east of the Mediterranean. And that's almost in the direction of Tigris and Euphrates, Mesopotamia, Sumerians. This is a kind of dormitorium, or it's too nice to be a storage, could be a storage. It's in the bedrock, that's what we think, because it's all limestone around, limestone pillars. So the most expected would be this is made, cut in the middle of the bedrock. I also see other possibilities, but it's not the time to mention them. Sintashta culture. That is the culture. It's most easy to imagine them when you want to know what kind of people it were. I don't know how much imagination the author of this image used, but you see the chariot with wheels, with spokes, lightweight for battle. You see metal weapons, you see symbols, which we should expect for these people, and this is a symbol that possibly remembers others of other things, but this is a symbol that comes from these people. Let's say some Hitler used it. It's not Hitler who invented it. So I don't know if how much this being seemingly a black person, how much this is imagination of the author, but it's also quite possible. I don't see anything that I would not expect, but to be honest, for me this is quite shocking. Whenever I see it, I've seen it several times, this image, it's quite shocking because it remembers me of Hitler, although I didn't have a direct experience with Second World War. So, but it's Hitler and the Nazi that abused symbols of these ancient people, these people that turned over the world. But there are parallels between what Hitler and the Nazis wanted and what these people did, and there's even genetic similarities, but that's not limited to Germans alone, to Nazis alone. These haplogroups, these groups that come from the Americas, dominate the whole of Europe. There are slight variations, and so this is not Aryan. It could be Aryan, but it's Sintashta. Sintashta. It's not the first of the people that realize the turnover event. It's also not the last. So all the people that built this and these pastoral warriors is pretty much the same group. They differ in mutations. So just the location of the Sintashta, this group, is between forest and and arid regions in the steppe regions. And this is the Caspian Sea, and this is the Black Sea. This is Ukraine. And just to orientate, I always think it's interesting to orientate. I try to find a way to locate Moscow, to have a reference point. This is the Dnieper that crosses Ukraine, and this is the Don. And Moscow is somewhere here. And I'm always surprised how close Moscow is to Europe, and especially to Ukraine. And then so Moscow somewhere over here, and the Sintashta are close to Moscow. So this is of a video: did plague depopulate Neolithic Europe? And this is an aspect that I think is very important for survival, for our existence of modern humans. And again, you will find Sintashta, and this I remember this way. This is Kazakhstan, this is Mongolia, this is Russia, again Kazakhstan, Caspian Sea. There's a dent here in Kazakhstan, and the Sintashta are in the dent, in the curve of a river. And they are right under the Ural mountains with a lot of minerals, and the Ural goes up and pretty much is goes to Nova Zembla. For me, Nova Zembla and the Ural going down to the Sintashta is pretty much the same mountainous area with a lot of minerals, metals, and these Sintashta will need minerals. And Sintashta, and then you already know that the Ural goes up here. They need metals for their weapons, for their wheels, to keep the wooden parts together. There's metal in the equipment of the horses as well. So they need metal. They need metal for warfare, and they need metal for agriculture, to make plows, to plow, to till the earth. And that will become very important. Tilling of the earth will become very important in our action plan, rather than not tilling of the earth, like for instance in agroforests. In agroforest you don't till the ground, the soil. If you don't till the soil, the organic material can be conserved. If you till a soil, you will disturb the biodiversity, and you will expose the organic material that will transform in carbon dioxide and let's say escape to the atmosphere. And for most people, CO2, carbon dioxide, going into the atmosphere causes climate change. For me, it's more complex, and I would prefer to talk about climate destruction. humans, especially after the arrival of these groups, with their plows tilting the earth, is causes climate destruction. Of course, before they plow, they first deforestate. So it's a combination of deforestation, plowing, that leads to climate destruction. Climate destruction is quite obvious. For instance, Delphi, I will see if I can show another photograph instead. Climate destruction you see in Greece. Our oracle of Delphi was in the woods and there were fountains, etc. Today it's an arid zone. So we transformed the big, the most fertile part of our world into degenerated soils. We destroyed the climate, and plowing and the deforestation that comes before is very important. So I go to one of the things of climate destruction is that it can lead to diseases. There's a correlation between diseases, even the actual pandemic, and pollution. But there are more clear, important associations. So, corded-ware, Syntasha, Afanasievo, Andronovo is close to Altai Mountains between Kazakhstan and Mongolia. This is important. This is China. It's an important point. It's where the Amarins or their hybrids come down, following the rivers Ob and Yenisei River, going to Altai, and then going to the old ancient cultures. But they have another route following the Ural, more or less, and so they end up here. And all these groups, whether the corded-ware went in the direction of Syntasha, or Syntasha or Yamnaya went into the direction of corded-ware, the thing is that all these groups that arrived from the Americas, or by this way, or by that way, or by the North Atlantic Gyre. They all lead to climate destruction and to violence, because they destroy the former families and males, especially the males. But they brought plague with them, just like vectors bring plague. Vectors do not suffer, do not get ill, do not die. They are resistant. So at that time, these groups were resistant to plague. And what kind of the vectors? They brought it in. Most probably, willingly or unwillingly, they used it as warfare, because most probably it would weaken persons. They would males and females. Well, that's enough for now, but it's important. These amaranth hybrids that came in through several routes They are vectors of plague. They brought the plague, and they caused Foki at the time. Foki. So we're talking about 4,000 years ago, but roughly 3,100 years ago there was the Bronze Age collapse. I'm quite convinced that plague was involved in the collapse, but that's for another time. So anyhow, it's close. They cause a turnover event 4,000 years ago, and you see these groups, cultures come close after, relatively close. Broad plague, but all of them were rather immune resistant. Okay, that's for now. Next video we will talk more about these groups and them being vectors and them being the preparators of climate destruction and future plague pandemics, like for instance the Black Death. The origin of Black Death lies in these groups coming through their roots to Altai, to the location of the Sintashta, south of the Ural, and so on. Plague in Bronze Age Eurasia, 3000 to 800 BC. So you see, this is the Bronze Age collapse. No, sorry. Bronze Age collapse is 3100 years ago. So that's 1100. So that's somewhere in between. And the collapse has a lot to do with violence, with genome instability and degeneration, which causes diseases or makes vulnerable for diseases, and plague is a disease, and the use of metals for plowing, tilling the earth, causes climate destruction. So climate destruction adds up. There's also loss of biodiversity, and adds up to plague and other diseases, because plague goes together with other bacterial diseases like cholera and several others. Okay, that's for now for this video. So they will end up being called the chariot warriors of the northern steppes. Their horses, they are the great horse domesticators, and I will show you in the next video that the horses come from the Americas. That's rather recent research that shows, just as the humans, the horses come from North America. This is based on ancient DNA of humans and horses. And so their horses are very precious. The men are buried with horses and their chariots and some of their weapons. They're not buried with their wives. They're buried with their horses. If the man was powerful, weapons, metal weapons. And then again, this is I think in Asia, something like Nepal, the symbol, and this is Theosophic. This is of course an older culture. This symbol does not come from Hitler or Nazis, but come from these groups that come from North America in waves, in hybrids with mutations. Thanks a lot for watching. I have to come down. They are very conscious about their wheels. With spokes. They're very conscious about it, about the importance. In some way, in later videos, I will explain that all of these groups that have to do with the exotic empire, Inca Empire, that come from the Americas, come up with, I would say, with a show. They like the idea that the local people, even if they are coming from the Americas as well, in earlier waves, they like to show that they are kind of gods. In some way the Spanish did this when they conquered South America, parts of South America. They like to come with the story that they are gods, or represent gods. Okay, that's for the next video. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.